Hi, my name's Sarah. I'm from Playdale Smitherman Limited. I've been working with the team at Huntingdonshire District Council to develop a healthy open spaces strategy. The strategy is now in draft form, and we had planned to spend the spring and summer out in the community giving local people the chance to comment on our proposals. Due to the COVID-19 lockdown, we are now using online techniques to engage. This presentation is about how we develop the strategy and what we are proposing for the future. At the end of the presentation, you'll find details of how you can send your comments, questions and queries. The strategy brings together community and stakeholder engagement alongside an evaluation of existing provision and research to set clear goals for the future of Huntingdonshire's parks and open spaces, with a particular focus on how they can support the health and well-being of local people. The strategy seeks to set clear goals in the context of the current environment with an objective view of what resources are available to deliver effective implementation and change. The aspirations of the strategy have to be achievable. It is a top-down approach, so it looks at the role of parks and open spaces across the district as a whole, rather than specific projects for specific parks. They'll come out of the strategy and be shaped by the strategy in the future. The Healthy Open Spaces strategy has been influenced by and influenced a range of other strategic approaches. For example, it connects with the health and well-being strategy in relation to the role of parks and open spaces in supporting and encouraging physical activity. It explores how parks and open spaces can contribute to the aspirations of the litter minimisation strategy. So it is interlinked with various strategies that impact on the community. It doesn't just sit in isolation. So this slide here uses data provided by the Ordnance Survey Green Space Mapping to understand the existing provision across Huntingdonshire. And it's really important that we understand existing provision and the wealth of accessible green spaces managed not just by the District Council but also by the town and parish councils and other organisations such as churches and sports clubs. During our community engagement, a number of people mentioned that they felt lucky to live in the area because of its wealth of accessible green space. And this is shown by the data, 79 metres squared of green space per person, which is just over double the average available for people living in Great Britain as a whole. It's also important to understand not just the amount of space available, but the quality of that space. So we visited a selected sample of spaces across the district and we evaluated them on two criteria, which are quality and value. So I'm going to talk first of all about quality criteria. We used a scoring system based around a number of factors, including welcome and arrival, infrastructure and facilities, play, how well maintained these spaces are. And it's important to remember that not every park and green space is going to score incredibly highly on these criteria. Parks like Hinchingbrook Country Park are always going to come out strongly because of the range of facilities within that park. Some green spaces do a lot for their community just by being well maintained and clean without that wealth of infrastructure on the site. So when we talk about quality, we want a good mix across the district of different sites doing different things. We also looked at the value of existing provision, again using a criteria-based scoring system. And if we think of quality as being about the site and what happens in the site, value is more about the site in context and what it contributes to its community. So for example, if a site is the only site in quite a large area, it's going to be more valuable because to an extent that's the only option for that community. If a site is in a deprived area, that is going to have more value because it's serving a deprived community. And we brought all these factors together so that we could start to understand what the existing provision was across Huntingdonshire and what that provision delivered for the community. And talking to the community was really at the heart of this process of developing the strategy. So we spoke to over 1,000 local residents through a range of mediums, including asking them to fill in questionnaires, attending focus groups, going along to events. And this infographic here highlights some of the key results from the questionnaire that we sent out, which was completed by just over 700 people. So you can see from this that people in Huntingdonshire are already making strong use of their open spaces. And although it has to be acknowledged that people who use the spaces were more likely to fill in this questionnaire, when we compare it with other areas, 95% is still a really strong score in terms of people who've visited a green space in the last 12 months. You can also see that 86% of the respondents believe that these spaces improve their mental health, that 71% regularly use these spaces to keep physically fit and healthy. And it's worth bearing in mind that this data was collated before the COVID-19 lockdown, and we have seen relatively significant increases in parks usage since then. So we do have a community that uses and values these spaces. As well as asking people to fill in questionnaires, we had conversations with local people through events and focus groups, and we made sure that we spent time talking to both park users and non-park users, because we wanted to encourage a balance of people to be using these spaces moving forward. So this is just a selection of quotes from some of our focus groups that helped us to understand some of the issues we might want to look at moving forward. So for example, some of the young people we spoke to felt that skateboarding was seen as a fit-all solution for what they wanted from their parks and open spaces, and they would actually like more of a variety of provision to attract them. So we had a lot of interesting conversations in terms of how people perceive our spaces at the moment and how people are using those spaces and how they might like that to change in the future. We also spent some time in local schools. So the drawing here is from some of the children at Cross Hall Junior School and captures their perfect park, which would include play provision, sports provision and a pond for turtles. Some of the children at Thorndown Primary School wrote postcards to themselves or to other people explaining why they thought you should go to the park and what makes it important to them. These were all ways for us to capture how people felt about the spaces and how we might want to develop them moving forward. One of the things that it's important to remember in terms of developing this strategy is that parks and open spaces are not a statutory service. There is no obligation to provide these services for the community, but they are really valued by the community, as shown by the questionnaire results a few slides back. So we have to understand what we're doing with our existing resource and look for opportunities about how we might use that more effectively and more efficiently moving forward. So this slide shows how £10 worth of expenditure is broken down across various elements. So for example, out of that £10, just over half, £5.50, is spent on the frontline team who manage and maintain our parks and open spaces. But we also look for ways that parks and open spaces can to an extent generate income to support their development and enhancement through things such as sports pitch hire, grant funding and grounds maintenance services. So there's been a lot of work done relatively recently about how parks and open spaces contribute to our communities and how you might monetize the value of those spaces. So for example, the total economic value to an individual is £30.24 per year, and that includes benefits gained from using local parks or green spaces and also non-benefits such as those spaces being preserved for future generations to enjoy. When we talk about well-being value, and this is data taken from Fields and Trust research, well-being value is measurements of life satisfaction. So that includes physical and mental health benefits that have occurred as a result of being able to use parks and open spaces. And Fields and Trust estimate that we would need to compensate every individual by £974 a year to replace the life satisfaction they would have gained from being able to use a local park more than once a month. So that really highlights there the value of these spaces in terms of what they're giving to communities. Our parks and open spaces as well are also helping the NHS. It's estimated that they deliver around £111 million per year in savings from reducing GP visits and also through social programmes such as prescribing and referrals. So you can see from this slide that parks and open spaces are really contributing to our communities and have a lot of value in there, despite the fact they're not statutory services. So one of the roles of the strategy is to look at how we can make the case for investment in our parks and open spaces in terms of the wider benefits that they're able to deliver. That has for a long time been a very traditional approach to parks management, and this slide, which is taken from an Association of Public Service Excellence presentation, captures the work that we expected from that traditional parks management role. So It's around visitor management, staff management, thinking about budgets, thinking about how we're making sure the park is open and welcoming and there for the community to use. Over time, this has very much changed, and we're now looking at a completely different model. So we have seen quite a dramatic shift in how parks are managed and maintained. And if you compare this slide to the previous slide, we're asking a lot more from parks management. So we need to engage with and work with local people and local stakeholders. We need to make sure that parks are operating efficiently and effectively and making the best use possible of available funding and resources. We need to have a clear vision and strategy for the role of our parks and open spaces, and that's what the Healthy Open Spaces strategy is seeking to set out. So we're looking at how our green spaces can help connect people with their community, how we can use green spaces to tackle issues such as social isolation. We need to explore how parks can sustain themselves through income generation, and it's not about parks becoming a charge for attraction. Parks should be free to access and free to enjoy, but it's what elements can we bring in that help us to generate some income from those spaces. So how can we be using events and activities? Which are the parks where we could be looking at additional infrastructure to generate income? And we need to understand how our parks can help improve our environment and help in the fight against climate change. So one of the things that we're looking at with the Healthy Open Spaces strategy is how we can deliver all of this through our parks, and how we can make those changes that benefit the wider community as well. So when we brought together our community and stakeholder engagement, site assessments and research, it highlighted 8 key issues for the strategy to address. Number 1, how do we retain and enhance the quality and value of existing provision? Number 2, families would like to see a destination play space in Huntingdonshire, a place where they can make a day of it and enjoy a wealth of play experiences. How can we move towards delivering that? Families also want to see a variety of play experiences of different levels across the district. Number 3, we need to address geographical gaps in underserved areas. Number 4, we need to make sure there is provision for people of all ages to enjoy and benefit from. Number 5, parks and open spaces should be accessible for people of all ages and all abilities. Number 6, the council cannot make change alone. We need to work with a range of partners, including town and parish councils, friends groups, local businesses and the third sector. Number 7, parks and open spaces are already helping our communities to stay fit and healthy. How can we help more people to benefit from them? And finally, number 8, what role can our parks and open spaces play in addressing climate change? So with any strategy, it is important to consider where we are now. And that's what we've talked about in the first part of the presentation. We're moving on now to where we'd like to be and how we're going to get there. My colleague always likes to say that if you don't know what you're trying to make, you don't know what ingredients to get. So for any strategy, it's useful to have an overarching vision that ties everything together. And the current vision for the draft Healthy Open Spaces strategy is embrace your space. More people using our parks, open spaces and play areas to benefit their health and well-being. And this vision came out of a stakeholder workshop, and it really encaptures what we're trying to do with the Healthy Open Spaces strategy, how we're trying to encourage people to embrace their local spaces. And we're going to talk now about the 4 themes that sit underneath that vision and the type of projects that we would expect to see coming out of the strategy. So I'm going to start with Shape Your Space. And Shape Your Space is very much about communities having more of a voice and a role in decision making around parks and open spaces, so that the parks and open spaces can deliver what communities need from them. And it's not about every park and open space being all singing, all dancing. It's about different levels of experience in different areas, but about communities having a voice in that process. It's also about how we improve the park infrastructure, because parks users do think the little things are important. It is important to have signage that helps you to get around a site, benches and pathways are available. We also want to look at how we can connect other local organisations with their parks and open spaces. So how can we encourage, the strategy looks at how we might encourage local schools to make more use of these facilities, how we might have more educational programmes going on in these areas. And it talks about how we can make our parks and open spaces accessible for people of all ages and all abilities. as well as the ways we might encourage people who are currently non-park users to make more use of these spaces, particularly with a focus on health and well-being. So if Shape Your Space is looking at how we shape parks to meet the needs of communities, Create Your Space is about how we use parks to understand and tackle issues within communities. So this has come out in part from our community engagement. For example, I spoke to a young mum who said one of the things that she liked most about her local play area is that she knew there'd always be another mum down there that she could have a chat with if she was having a hard day. And you'll find that parks and open spaces are friendly spaces. They are places where people come together and will have a chat. So with Create Your Space, we're looking at how we can create communities through parks and open spaces and play areas, how we can use them to tackle social isolation, improve physical health and support well-being. So one of the projects in here is this idea of creating a destination play space. That's responding to the feedback we've had from local families about wanting that level of play space where you can spend the whole day. And water play came up quite significantly in that as well. So this is about how we can explore options for that and move forward with that in the future. It's also about how we work better in partnership, particularly around health and well-being. How do we develop links with local GPs? How do we work with public health, for example? We've put on here about creating an urban park for the Oxmoor estate. So that's about protecting and enhancing existing provision within the Oxmoor estate by bringing it together to create that urban park. But it's also about finding a way to bring the community together to benefit from having that space in their area. And Create Your Space is very much about how do we develop those partnerships, how do we work with local organisations to deliver positive change together. So we move on now to Celebrate Your Space. Huntingdonshire has a wealth of great open spaces and play areas and parks, and this is about how we make sure that people know that. A lot of our parks users are very aware of that. Our non-parks users aren't so aware of the wealth of opportunities that are available to them. And it's worth mentioning again that these opportunities will come out of a post-social distancing world, but we want to look at how we can use programmes of events and activities to bring people into our parks and open spaces. We want to focus on intergenerational events to bring communities together. We also want to make sure that it's easy to find out information about your nearest parks and open spaces, how to access them and what facilities are available in them. For example, we spent time with an older people's group at the Medway Centre, and one of the things they told us was we're not going to go to a park or a play area if we don't know there's a bathroom there. So it's about helping people to find information easily and readily so they can make decisions about the types of parks they want to visit and when they want to visit them. And this aim also looks at how we might pilot community open spaces management in the future, which is giving communities a very tangible role in how open spaces are managed. Earlier we talked about how traditional parks management no longer meets the needs of our sites and local people. We need to reinvigorate our approach to your spaces, thinking differently about how your parks, open spaces and play areas are managed and maintained, making sure we make the most efficient use of available resources, considering both strategic and operational approaches. So some of the projects we've shown here on this slide give you a feel of the type of things that we might look at doing differently. So we definitely want to have relationships with GP clusters and have conversations with them about how they can use parks and open spaces through models such as social prescribing. We've talked here about exploring operations for income generation, and that's looking at how we can bring income into the parks for the benefit of the parks to sustain the parks moving forward, and that might be through events or sponsorship. Participatory budgeting is an interesting model that is about involving communities in understanding what budget is available for spaces, how that budget is spent, and having discussions with them about how that might be done differently and what their priorities would be. So Reinvigorate Your Space is the strategy exploring the opportunities where we can think differently and try new things in terms of how parks are managed and maintained. But the underlying objective is for the parks to be there to benefit the local community and to continue to support people's health and well-being. So I've talked about the type of projects and the key themes and the overarching vision for the strategy. And just to conclude, our approach to developing and delivering the strategy has been based around eye care. So we have explored how we can inspire people through our parks and open spaces. We have collaborated with stakeholders in the community and the strategy explores how this will continue in the future. Huntingdonshire District Council will ultimately be accountable for the strategy, but delivering the changes outlined within it is about working in partnership with a whole host of partners, including town and parish councils, as well as public health, education, sport, leisure and recreation. So it is about working together with a wealth of partners. We have been respectful throughout this process. We've listened to all ideas and given as many people as possible an opportunity to be involved. And we have considered an approach to parks management that is enterprising and strategic and seeks to ensure that Huntingdonshire continues to have high quality, high value green spaces. So thank you for joining me today. I hope that this presentation has given you a feel for the process that we use to develop the strategy and the work within the strategy and the recommendations for the future. We'd be really keen to have your feedback. So in the video's description below, there is a link to a quick questionnaire. It'd be great if you could fill that in. But if there's anything you think we've missed, or if you have any questions or queries, please feel free to send me an email. It's research@playdalesmithman.co.uk. And again, I will make sure that that email address is in the description for the video. So I just wanted to say thank you for joining me today. Take care and stay safe. Thank you.